her darkened skin, while her open eyes seemed to beg me for help. I woke up, startled, with my heart pounding in my chest. My skin was covered in cold sweat, and when I looked at Estrella, I found her little body sleeping, with a slight temperature that made her skin feel hotter than usual. I held her desperately, as if trying to make sure she was still there, that she hadn't vanished into the darkness. Tears began to run down my face and I couldn't stop them. I couldn't stay any longer in that place. Everything around me felt wrong, as if something invisible were surrounding the house. I needed to flee with my daughter before it was too late. I carefully got up, making sure Estrella was still asleep, and walking to the bedroom door with my hands trembling, I tried to open it, but it wouldn't move. I tried again, this time with more force. Nothing. My eyes filled with tears as I tried turning the doorknob over and over, but it wouldn't give. The door was locked. I took a deep breath, trying not to lose my composure. I couldn't panic, not with my daughter there, sick, vulnerable. I rested my forehead against the wood, feeling my own breathing become erratic. The only thing I could do at that moment was wait. I lay back down next to Estrella, feeling the warmth of her skin against mine. Her breathing was slow, but her temperature remained high. I couldn't do anything else but hold her. I hugged her and let the tears fall in silence. I felt trapped, completely defenseless. My heart and my instinct told me the same thing. These people were not good, they were taking advantage of someone who needed help. I prayed to God to help me, begged with all my heart and strength to protect my daughter. The next morning, I did my best to act normally. I didn't want to raise any suspicions, not when I was so close to finding an opportunity to leave. The dream from the previous night was still fresh in my mind. The image of that dark figure taking Estrella away still made me tremble, but I couldn't let fear paralyze me. During breakfast, Guillermo came over with his calm smile, as if everything was fine, as if he hadn't locked me in. Last night he told me he had spoken with a friend, a doctor from another state, someone he had trusted for years. He assured me that this doctor could check the girl, that he had experience with children, and that it wasn't the first time he had dealt with cases like Estrella's. His words didn't reassure me. Something in his tone, the way he said it, made me defensive. Then, with the same kind smile as always, he told me he could take the baby, that I didn't have to worry about anything, that she would be in good hands. He offered help, money, so I could distract myself a little so I wouldn't be so stressed. Every muscle in my body tensed, but I didn't let my face reflect anything. I nodded slowly while listening to him continue talking. Maybe he thought I was naive, that I didn't realize what he was implying. I had never been to school, but I wasn't as dumb as he thought. I understood the moment he said it. He was offering me money for my daughter. I stayed calm, told him I had to think about it, that I had never been separated from Estrella. I didn't want to rush, I couldn't show him that I had already made a decision that day. Guillermo barely left the house. He moved from the living room to the kitchen, making sure to stay close, as if waiting for my answer. He tried to make me feel comfortable, smiled at me when he looked at me. He made comments about how difficult it was to be a mother and how he could help me, but I didn't listen to any of that. I went into the kitchen with Estrella. On my back, I felt her little legs pressed against my skin, her breathing calm as she slept. Guillermo was watching me from the door, telling me that I should put her down, that I shouldn't get so tired carrying her. I just nodded, pretending to listen, while my mind was focused on only one thing: getting out of there. That afternoon, while I was sweeping the backyard, I saw that one. The truck was parking at the entrance of the ranch. They were workers from the fields. They stayed outside, waiting for someone to come out and attend to them. Maybe they were coming to receive their payment. I didn't think twice. I started walking between the trees, taking slow steps, not rushing. I couldn't draw attention. The air was thick, the sticky heat pressed against my skin. One step, another. Each movement was an effort to stay calm, not to look back. When I got far enough, I quickened my pace, my legs moving faster, my feet sinking into the dry earth, the air burning my lungs, but I didn't stop. Fear drove me. I ran with the baby on my back, her little body pressed against mine, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would explode. I didn't know where I was going, I just knew I had to get away from that place, that if I stayed another second, I wouldn't leave again. I said the few prayers I knew, asking God to lend us a hand. The night enveloped me like a heavy, suffocating cloak as I moved through the trees. I couldn't follow any path, I couldn't risk being found. I felt like they were behind us, not just Guillermo but also the priest. Fear crept into my mind, bringing images I didn't want to imagine. I thought about what they might do to my daughter if they caught me, what they really wanted with her. I tried to push those thoughts away, focusing on walking, on staying in motion. The only thing that mattered to me was my little girl. I held her tightly against my chest, feeling the burning heat of her fevered body, hearing her broken cries from exhaustion. Her fever was still weakening. I squinted my eyes, narrowing my vision to avoid focusing on what surrounded us. I was so scared I felt more alone than ever. Estrella stopped crying and that worried me more. Her breathing was still there but it was too quiet. I was terrified that her little body wouldn't withstand the cold, that the temperature would take her before I could do anything, but then I heard a soft ringing, the sound of a bell like the ones shepherds placed on the necks of their cattle to keep them from getting lost. The sound filtered through the wind and the murmurs of the forest, appearing and disappearing without a fixed direction. The first thing that came to my mind was the image of that creature from my dreams, that man with the head of a bull, but when I turned around I realized there was no one else with us. I walked for a few more hours and felt that I couldn't go on. My knees gave out and I collapsed onto the ground. I couldn't go on, not when I felt my daughter slipping away. Her little body barely moved and panic hit me like never before. The tears came before I could stop them. I couldn't lose her, it couldn't be her end. I begged God to save her, to not let her go. Estrella was the only good thing in my life, the only light in a world of mistakes and bad decisions. The fever consumed her and all I could do was hold her, cry and plead. I remembered every moment since her birth, from the instant I first held the fragile little one with eyes so big and full of life. Since then she had always been there. She was with me when I had no one else, when we slept in the chapel, when we walked from one town to another searching for a roof over our heads, when we left my in-laws' house, feeling something break inside me. I wasn't the best mother, I never had someone to teach me how to be one. I never knew what it was like to have a mom who would hug me, protect me, but I was learning with my little one. My baby taught me what love was. My face was soaked in tears, my lips trembled, my hands clung to her little body with a fear that was impossible to describe. She went, I would go too. After almost walking all night with my exhausted body and trembling legs, I saw the reflection of the moon on the water. A river wound through the trees. I had no strength to think about anything other than following its course. Each step felt heavier but I didn't stop. Estrella was burning with fever, but her breathing was more stable when I finally saw the first houses. I felt like my body was about to collapse. I didn't know where I was or how I had gotten there, but it didn't matter. I crossed the streets almost staggering and I felt my legs were going to give out at any moment. A doctor, a woman with a warm gaze and steady hands, took my arm and told me everything would be fine. She repeated that I shouldn't worry. When I saw her hold Estrella gently and examine her patiently, my tears didn't stop falling. I couldn't allow anyone to find us with the little air I had left. I begged the woman not to say we were there. I don't know if she understood the fear in my eyes, but she agreed without hesitation. Hours passed and Estrella started to improve. Her fever went down, her little body no longer burned like before, but I couldn't relax. Being in one place was tormenting. Every time footsteps were heard outside, every time someone opened a door, my heart stopped. For a moment, I prayed all the time, asking that the man wouldn't find us, that the priest wouldn't know where we were. No. I know what would have happened if I hadn't found that doctor. It was like an angel sent by life. The next day, I left the health center and tried to get as far away as possible from that place. I didn't want to stay in one spot for too long, not when I still felt like at any moment someone could find me. I lived each day in fear, with the anxiety of not knowing if I was far enough away. I carried the paranoia of seeing shadows where there were none, of being startled every time someone came near us. There were nights when the temptation to return to my in-laws or to my grandmother's haunted me. At least there, I had a roof, a place to sleep without constantly running. But I knew I couldn't do it. It wouldn't be a future for my little girl. With my father-in-law, I'd still be a burden, an annoyance. With my grandmother, I'd just find the same harshness with which I was raised. So, I decided to keep going alone. It wasn't easy, I didn't know exactly how to do it, but the only thing I was sure of was that Estrella would never be separated from me. I carried her on my back. While I looked for work, while I walked from one town to another, while I adapted to each place I arrived at, I couldn't allow myself to trust anyone. I was afraid of meeting people like Guillermo. I didn't understand how a man could be so generous and so disgusting at the same time. I thought about his calm smile, the way he offered me his help as if he were a savior, as if he really cared about us, and then I thought about his words, his insistence, the way he wanted to separate me from my daughter so easily. But what troubled me most was the priest, a man of God, a messenger of faith, someone who was supposed to protect, help the most needy, serve with compassion, and yet he was there willing to do those things. I couldn't understand it. Every time I remembered his words, his insistent voice, his desperation to bathe Estrella, a shiver ran through my skin. I didn't want to think about what his intentions really meant. I didn't want to imagine what would have happened if I had stayed one more day in that place. The only thing left for me was to keep going, to keep moving forward, to keep running, to keep looking for a place where my daughter could grow up without fear. For years, the idea of going to the authorities lingered in my mind. I thought of all the women who might have gone through the same thing, that I surely wasn't the only victim of Guillermo and that priest. Maybe there were others who didn't have the same luck I did, who didn't manage to escape in time, but fear always won. If I spoke up, if I raised my voice, I felt they would find us, that they would. It didn't matter how far I had gone, they would find me and Estrella. I couldn't risk seeing my daughter grow up by my side. It was a dream I wasn't willing to give up. Still, the thought never completely disappeared. I kept dreaming of that man with the bull's head. He would appear in my exhausted mind. They weren't as intense as before, but they were still there, like an echo. Sometimes I saw him from afar, with his horns pointing to the sky and his dark eyes fixed on me. Other times I felt him closer, breathing on my neck. A part of me still believed he was after my daughter. I didn't know what it meant, if it was just a reflection of everything I had lived through or if there was really something I couldn't see, but it didn't matter. The only thing I could do was hold on to my little girl, to the life I had built for us, and keep moving forward. God was watching over us, and that was the most important thing. 13 years have passed since that night in the forest, 13 years since I ran with my daughter in my arms, with fear clawing at my chest and desperation pushing me toward the unknown. Now Estrella is no longer a helpless baby. She is a strong girl with a smile that lights up even the darkest days. I've done everything I can to raise her, to give her a dignified life. Even though sometimes I feel it's not enough, it hurts that I couldn't give her more. I regret that she didn't have a childhood like other children, that she couldn't go to school like she should have. Despite everything, I've tried to teach her what I can. I've worked hard, taken any honest job that allowed us to eat, dress, and have a place to sleep along the way. I've crossed paths with good people, people who've lent a hand without asking for anything in return, who understood my situation without needing to ask too many questions. Still, trusting is hard. It's difficult for me to let my guard down, to not see strangers as potential threats. I wonder if I'll ever be able to stop being afraid. It's still there, as present as always. It's what keeps me alert, what keeps me from sleeping peacefully at night. Sometimes I think I'm too overprotective, that I smother her with my fears, but I can't help it. The idea of something taking her away from me, of her being in danger again, is unbearable. Despite everything, I'm grateful to life for having her by my side, for having made it this far, for seeing her grow. Estrella is my reason to keep going, the only certainty I have in a world where everything can change in an instant. Please take care of your children, pay attention to the people around them. It doesn't matter if they're family, evil is everywhere, and it's always better to be cautious.